Good evening. Thank you again for being here tonight. It's the 2021 Initiation Temple's 12 weeks of follow-up on the fall mentoring. We're doing this during the deep, dark season of the winter, though, even though winter doesn't officially start until next week. But we're going to be taking care of business here, and today is December 16th, 2021. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for being here. It's been quite a journey, and we're very happy to be involved in these teachings because they are some of the best teachings we've come up with, and it wasn't us that came up with them. The Ascended Master, Saint Germain, described that we needed to go do the initiation temples that were in ancient Egypt, and so each week Vicky would regress me back to 4,500 years ago when I went through the initiation temples, and Serapis Bey was my teacher. And it's quite interesting because as we go to each of these Ascension temples each week, doing a past life regression, I would bring the information back, and it was absolutely fantastic information. Now, the very first week of follow-up, we went to the Now Temple because it was important that we start creating regeneration in our bodies and creating the crystalline structure through the DNA. And so be doing your 24-strand DNA manifestation, do your 48-strand manifestation, and then go on and do the 96-strand DNA manifestation, because as we get more DNA, we receive more information and more power from the higher dimensions and the ascended beings. And the DNA is what everything was created with. And so the more DNA you have, the more creative you are in following in the footsteps of the divine creator, the almighty I am that I am, the creator of the multiverse. Now, last week we went to the Sun Temple, and in the Sun Temple you've got to make sure you've got worked on all your shadow self so you don't find yourself going into fear or going into shame, blame, or guilt or whatever, because we've got to do the work and clear our bodies of negative emotions, negative experiences, and use the energy to know that we are a part of God, we are one with God, and we are one with each other. Very important teachings. Now, the Philae Temple or Isis Temple had to be moved when the lake was forming, and we went through this before, but what was interesting is that it was a huge effort done by the Egyptian government to move this temple. And it was originally really down close to the Nile, but then on an island in the Nile River, and because they were filling up Lake Nasser, they had to move it. And Vicky and I were able to visit this temple, and it's a beautiful temple. It's a huge temple that has beautiful tapestry and beautiful workmanship. But let me tell you, the beauty on the outside, you go inside and it's dark, and it is, there's very little light. In fact, there was just a fire burning inside of the temple. And as we went into this temple, Serapis Bey, known as Set back then, 4,500 years ago, and he greeted me at each of the temples and was my mentor taking me through these temples. And so I've gotten to know Serapis Bey a lot better lately, and it's been a great experience because Serapis Bey is one of the kindest ascended masters I've ever met. In fact, he always assists me in feeling better about myself, about my life, about what I'm doing, and it's been a marvelous experience. And so just know that the ormus that you're given in these temples was given to augment your spiritual energy of your auric field, of your electromagnetic system within your heart and your brain, and all of the various chakra systems. And so that's why ormus is important. In fact, I'm taking ormus currently with atypical bacterial formulation in order to treat my Whipple's disease in my pancreas. And it's working, and I'm able to use less and less insulin, which is fantastic. My goal is to get off of insulin and get my pancreas fully working again. Now, it's interesting how in this moon temple, it's amazing how we serve false gods, and we're tempted by these false gods. And even, some people are depicting the people in charge of the current situation we're in, that they are acting like gods and telling people what to do and put in their body and everything else. And the fact of the matter is, it's our body, and only God can tell us what we should do with our body. Now, we do have free agency, and when we choose to follow man instead of following God, bad things happen to us. And, even the fallen angels that left God, and Lucifer, one of the brightest beings that God created, that left God's presence and started actually fighting against the natural laws of God, the universal laws of God. And these false gods are appearing all over the place in our current time. And so we have to be very careful not to worship these false gods, because that's one of the commandments. Thou shalt have no other God before me, and no graven image or anything except belief in the true and living God. Now, the moon temple was a test of our emotional maturity and strength, and our ability to not follow these things. And we need to control our emotions so they don't control us. Real light comes from the sun, while reflected light comes from the moon and the darkness. So the lessons from the Sun Temple were so important, because we had to be totally clear of our dark side, our dark emotions, thoughts, and memories from our mind, heart, and soul. And it gives us strength to continue on the ascension journey. Any negative thoughts or feelings will stop our progression and journey. So the moon temple is filled with reflected light. Now, I had so many things happen to me during that, and I want you to go back and review the moon temple, the week number 2, because it's amazing. All these things could have caused me to stop progressing, but I did not feed into their scenario. I didn't feed into the false gods, and luckily I made it through the second initiation temple without having too much trauma, but it was a little frightening. Even going back in the regression, I could feel the energies, and it was really important that I stayed in the light and didn't go into fear or mental projections or negative thought forms or any of these things. Reflecting of the light can be deceiving. Have purpose in all we think, say, and do, and stay in the pure light of God. Now, like I said, this is a beautiful temple on the outside, but you go in and there were very dark things going on inside. And I heard Set say, do not pay attention to the reptiles, because there was a lot of reptilians in there. And focus on the yellow, pink, and blue flame which appears around me. They call it the threefold flame of illumination. And the yellow represents wisdom, the pink represents love, and the blue power or will. Now, when we look at pink, you know, when I first had my Correllian photography, my heart was green. And as I worked through and brought more of the love of God in, my heart became more pink, which is interesting because the pink represents the pure love of God. And the blue emanating represents the will or the power of God. And the love, wisdom, and power are the most important things. And the wisdom of God is represented by the blue flame. So, excuse me, the yellow flame, sorry. So I focus on the flame, which pushes out the reptiles and the beings that was implanted in my head. You know, I went through many things. And everything clears, my head heals very quickly because of those visualizing the love of God, the power of God, and the will of God. The wisdom of God, which is the golden light. So very, very fascinating. And it dissolves any black gel. Now, if you think about it, they're injecting black gel into people currently. And a lot of people wonder what that is, and it's a control thing they've used on the secret space program soldiers and all kinds of stuff, but it's not something we should participate in because it's not from God. Now, reflected light represents light that is not pure, but a reflection. And it's still not pure light, but filled with deception and darkness of shadow, self, and death. And we should stay in the pure light of God, which brings eternal life, filled with love, happiness, pure light, truth, and wisdom. Now, when we follow God, we actually get on a path of righteousness, or the way of righteousness. And Christ consciousness is the way of righteousness. Freedom and empowerment is a gift for all of us. Loving thoughts and unconditional selfless service is the mystical, which gives power to the whole and causes miracles to happen. So more and more of us need to get in that love vibration, the loving thoughts, and unconditional selfless service, and we will see miracles happening on this planet. I'm already seeing them. I've seen thousands of miracles, in fact, but the more of us get in that vibration, we will create even more miracles. And using the Christ consciousness or love in all things will lead to our ascension into the higher dimensions. Now, the ascension only comes when we follow the only true God, which is the creator of the multiverse. I am that I am. And with God's love, we will be able to go through the ascension. Now, following partial light eventually leads to death and destruction, and we don't ascend. And it's okay, but we'll have to repeat. In other words, be reincarnated again and have to go through all this again. And quite frankly, I'm pretty well done with going through all of the stuff on this earth currently. I want the earth to go through the ascension and myself go through the ascension. And I hope I'm teaching that correctly for you, that you know as you ascend, you'll be in a happier state, a more perfected state, a fifth dimensional body of light, love, and plasma. And you'll be directly connected to God and all the other ascended masters. And this is very good. And as we access that pure light of God through prayer, fasting for righteousness, and meditation, that's how we overcome everything. Shadow work must be done with removal of all the shadows of darkness from our heart, mind, and soul, replacing the shadows with pure love of God. Each major energy center is empowered from spinning with the rhythm of the God resonance, which puts us into total alignment with the universal truths and the universal laws of God. Fear stops the flow of love and truth. In fact, it makes it so we can't move forward, and it may even put us back. So do not go into fear. And fear is what the cabal is creating currently in everybody. And we have to not feed into the fear. We need to feed into the love of God. So, next week we're going to go to the underground temple again. Now, I didn't go through a lot of what happened to me personally, but it's important that you realize we have to learn about all these situations so we can deal with what's going on in this third dimension. And that way we'll be able to create a better reality, not only in this dimension, but it'll raise our souls into the higher dimensions. So, the initiation of the moon temple, its reflected light leads to the darkness of illusion, sickness, and death. The lesson is to only follow the pure light, love, power, and will of God, and wisdom of God. So just make sure every day your thoughts are on these things. And it is a teaching and a remembering of what we need to do. And as we do this, we will lead others to the light and love. So do we have any questions, babe? I'm going to go ahead and start answering your questions.
I have something. Yeah. Will you elaborate about in the moon temple about not paying attention to the dark energies?
Yes.
That applies to it.
One of the things Vicki was talking about, she says, we should not feed into any of the darkness, because the darkness is what causes us to go into fear. It lowers our vibration. It stops us from moving forward. And in the moon temple, I had all kinds of distractions come out at me. Everything from, a dancing, beautiful woman that was very distracting to, Bahamut telling me to worship him. And that he would give me all this stuff. And it was very fascinating, because as we get tempted to do stuff that isn't right, our soul knows that it isn't right. And it'll say to us, oh, don't do that. And then you think about, oh, geez, but all the money, all the glory, all of the fame, whatever it is. And so we have to be careful about this. Okay, so let's answer some questions. Oh, next week we're not going to have class. I'm sorry. We have a friend family party that night, and so we'll just extend it a little longer. But next week, enjoy the week of Christmas time and all of the energy of the birth of the Savior, and just, know that these things are a part of a celebration of life, and we need to celebrate, the greatest gift that was given to us back then. So, okay, is the spinning the Merkabas? Yes, the spinning, what happens with our DNA is it collapses on each other to form pyramids, and then they get a top and a bottom of a pyramid together, and it becomes what we call a Merkaba. And as that Merkaba spins, it creates even more energy and information coming into us. So as you get more and more DNA, you can create more Merkabas and get more energy, more information coming from the divine, and become a higher divine being of light and love and power. So just know that these things are very, very important, and this is how we evolve. And so if you haven't got the 24-strand DNA manifestation, please send me your email to scott.healthlongevitync@gmail.com, and I will send you back a copy of the divine invocation, the decrees for putting my world in divine order, and the weekly accountability that helps us to remember to do these things that are going to evolve us every day. It's very important. Okay. Now, the different octaves. When I learned music, an octave is 13 notes higher than the last note. And, as you know, the piano, when they build it, the key of C is the main key, and you have, it goes from C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C again. And when you go from C to C, it's an octave higher. Even though it sounds like the same note, it is a frequency higher than the other one. In other words, the C's match, but the one is lower octave, the other is a higher octave. And so that's what octaves means, is we're moving from a state of low C or middle C to a higher C. And everything created in the universe was created with light and sound. And so the sound vibrations are very important. The other most common key is the key of G and the key of F. F has one flat, G has one sharp, F sharp. And, the key of F has one flat, which is, I think it's B. But don't hold me to that. It's been a long time since I studied music. But every key has an octave higher, and you can even go an octave lower. And the octave is the same note, but at a higher frequency, or a density that is in a higher frequency. Okay. Okay, yes. Somebody's asking if I have a feeling for the coming few weeks. Yes. It does feel like we're going to have a huge shift this last part of December, and we are going to move not only into where the light's starting to get more often, because we're going to start at the solstice.